Visit Lex proudly presents an ABR Films presentation. Nestled deep inside horse country between Louisville and Lexington, along the Kentucky River, sits the oldest continually operating bourbon distillery in America.
Right in Frankfort, Kentucky, we're making some of the world's best spirits, and you can be enjoyed around the world. And we're making it with about 440 local people.
Here in Frankfort, the capital city of the Commonwealth, Buffalo Trace Distillery has been making bourbon for more than 2 centuries. Through a timeless dedication by a lineage of proud craftsmen, Buffalo Trace Distillery has earned its place among the legendary spirits makers of the world. Prior to being renamed the Buffalo Trace Distillery in 1999, it was known by several names historically, including most notably the George T. Stagg Distillery and the OFC Distillery. The relationship between the workers and the distillery is deeply personal.
The distillery's always been a very important part of this community. Most everybody's family, at one point or another, someone's had somebody work here.
Just as the movement of whiskey is a vital process in the aging process, so is the passing of the torch at Buffalo Trace among family members from one generation to the next. One such employee, whose family history is inextricably blended with the storied history of the distillery, is Freddie Johnson. A third-generation employee of Buffalo Trace, Johnson's introduction to bourbon began with his grandfather, a 52-year employee under Colonel Blanton, and extended to his father, who had a 47-year run with the late Elmer T. Lee.
I currently get a chance to work with members of the distillery that their fathers worked with my dad, and their grandfather worked with my grandfather.
Today, Johnson is one of the most popular tour guides at Buffalo Trace, sharing his expansive personal and institutional knowledge with tourists from around the globe.
There's some bourbon that's getting ready to get released, and I'm looking for some of it. It'll be some of the last barrels of bourbon that Elmer and my dad got a chance to handle at this distillery.
Since 1999, bourbon production in Kentucky has increased more than 170%, with premium small batch and single barrel brands driving the bourbon renaissance.
When we come out with a new product, people in California know about it in an hour, for example. So I think people are appreciating the amount of effort and quality that goes into making a good bourbon. And when they go out and spend their hard-earned dollars, they want something with a story, and they want something that's authentic and something that they're willing to spend their money on.
Leading the revitalization has been Buffalo Trace. The distillery has garnered more than 300 awards for its wide range of premium bourbons, including 7 different distillery titles since 2000 from such notable publications as Whiskey Magazine, Whiskey Advocate Magazine, and Wine Enthusiast Magazine.
The one that makes me the most proud was in 2000, before the bourbon boom. Malt Advocate Magazine named us Distiller of the Year, and that was the first time any American distillery had ever received that honor.
In 2013, Buffalo Trace Distillery added its highest distinction to date, being designated a National Historic Landmark.
There's only a handful that are fully functional, operational National Historic Landmarks. And for Buffalo Trace to be one of those is really pretty cool. Most locations is either a building or a monument. This is a living and breathing National Historic Landmark. We want to be able to be consistent with the bourbons that we make, but we don't think that that's where it's going to end up. We think that the perfect bourbon has not yet been made.
From the old Taylor House, erected in 1792, to the 1883 rebuilding of the Dickel Building, to the 1886 introduction of a steam heating system for the warehouses, Buffalo Trace's unrelenting desire to innovate drives their endless pursuit of attaining the holy grail of bourbons. They were the first distillery to introduce climate-controlled warehouses.
So what we actually do in the winter months is we close all the windows. We've learned that whiskey aging in a barrel when the temperature reaches 45 degrees or cooler goes dormant. Might as well have it in a glass jar. So we're going to close the windows, we're going to crank up the steam heat, and we have barrels with thermometers in it.
And in 1953, also celebrated their 2 millionth barrel by building the world's only single-barrel warehouse. 31 years later, the distillery introduced Blanton's, the world's first single-barrel bourbon. The rich heritage and tradition of horses in Kentucky parallel that of bourbon. And Blanton's reflects that with a collector's edition set of 8 different bottle stoppers featuring a horse and jockey in different strides and poses resembling the stages of a horse race. In December 2013, Warehouse X became the first new building constructed on the distillery property in more than 60 years. Constructed of 4 independent barrel chambers, Warehouse X is designed to explore the limits of environment influences on the quality of bourbon. It allows for experimentation into variables such as temperature, humidity, airflow, sunlight, and more. Every detail matters here, from where an oak tree is planted to where the corn comes from. Crafting bourbon is part art form, part science. No matter the era or the age, the motivation and goal remain the same. And at Buffalo Trace, this pioneering spirit is forever linked to the journey toward crafting the authoritative, ideal bourbon.
You know, Scotch was considered the premier product in the world. And if you think about it now, we've got some bourbon at Buffalo Trace Distillery that's sitting right up as some of the top 3 whiskeys of the world.
All the while honoring tradition and embracing change. On the next episode of America's Native Spirit, the story of bourbon is told.